All right, good evening everyone. It's 6:30pm and we'll commence our agenda briefing forum. I'd like to begin with the acknowledgement of country and invite Councillor Anderson to read the acknowledgement.
Nang Jarapun Wajak, Nunga Bujak, Yankeni, Nija Bilia Barok. I am honoured to be standing on Wajak Nunga country on the banks of the Swan River. Nang Kadich Nunga Mort, Ken Kadich Nija Wajak Nunga Bujak, Nang Kadich Nija Nunga, Belia, Kora, Yeye, Bora, Belpeni Mujak, Nunga Kadijan Mort, where Buja Yeye. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and respect past, present, and emerging leaders, their continuing cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship with the land, which continues to be important today. Nanyaka Belpeni Nunga, Belia, where Mort Nija Buja. I thank them for their contribution made to life in the town of Victoria Park and to this region.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Item 4 on the agenda is announcements from the presiding member. Firstly, the purpose of this agenda briefing forum is to provide an opportunity for elected members to ask questions and obtain additional information on officer reports in the draft ordinary council meeting agenda. It is not a decision-making forum, nor is it open for debate. Members of the public that may be directly affected by an item on the agenda can make presentations, deputations, statements and ask questions prior to the matter being formally considered by Council at the next ordinary council meeting. All participation in this agenda briefing forum will be audio recorded and live streamed on the town's website. The live stream will be archived and made available on the town's website after this meeting. 4.3, conduct of the meeting. All those in attendance are expected to extend due courtesy and respect to the meeting by refraining from making any adverse or defamatory remarks regarding council, the staff or any elected member. No one shall create a disturbance at a meeting by interrupting or interfering with the proceedings through expressing approval or dissent, by conversing or by any other means. All questions and statements made by members of the public are not to personalise any elected member or town staff member. Questions and statements are to be directed to the presiding member, who may choose to call upon an officer of the town or another elected member to assist with responses. Public participation time. There is an opportunity to ask questions and make statements at the beginning and the end of the meeting. However, as per our usual practice, agenda briefing forums are for questions from the public only related to items on tonight's agenda. The opportunity to ask questions and make statements at the end of this meeting is limited to items on the agenda and those members of the public who did not participate at the first public participation time. Public participation time will generally be held for no more than 30 minutes and any additional time must be by agreement from the meeting and will be in 5-minute increments if required to be extended. As per our usual practice, it's 3 questions per person and 2 minutes per statement for agenda items. If there are very few people to ask questions, we can of course allow some more. Responses to questions that get taken on notice at this evening's forum that relate to an agenda item will be presented in the officer report for the ordinary council meeting agenda under the heading of further consideration, which usually appears towards the end of the individual report. Item 5 is attendance. Tonight we have all elected members in attendance, save for Councillor Minson, who is on statutory leave. We have a number of members of the town's executive and administration led by the acting CEO, Mr Doy. We have nobody on approved leave of absence. Item 6 is declarations of interest. Mr CEO, do we have any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. We do. We have declarations of interest with regards to item 11.2 from all elected members in attendance, and the reason is for the reason that's given. It is a financial interest, and the reason that's given: if council decides to proceed with superannuation for elected members, then this will create a financial gain or benefit for me. That is the same reason for all elected members in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest that elected members need to make in relation to any other items on the agenda? No. Just a reminder, if you do discover that you do have an interest that needs to be declared, please make sure you do that before we get to the item for discussion. It also goes without saying that item 11.2 will not be the subject of discussion this evening. Item 7 on the agenda is public participation time, so it's now 6:35 p.m. and I'll open public participation time. So members of the public who are invited to come forward for public participation time can ask both their questions and their statements at the same time. We don't do that separately. So first on the list, Vince Maxwell, please come forward, state your name and suburb.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Bit of echo. Vince Maxwell from Victoria Park.
Thanks, Mr Maxwell. Have you listed down for questions in relation to 13.1, 13.2 and 14.3? Is that right?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
A few weeks ago, the state government put out for consultation a draft public health planning guide for local governments. And I'm not sure what local government and specifically the town has in regards to public health. Is this something the town should be involved in?
What item on the agenda is that related to, Mr Maxwell?
Well, health is mentioned in pretty well all of the agenda items under the health and safety is one of the key impact categories in the tree retention policy and the Burswood Station East, Archer Street, Mint Street. They've all got that mentions health and safety in there, so it is a core responsibility. But the reason I'm asking this question tonight is that submissions for this have to be in around the time of the council meeting. So if the council's intending on making a submission,
well,
need to
Mr
do
Maxwell,
something soon.
that isn't relevant to any item that's on the agenda. The reference to health and safety is a general matter in relation to risk assessment. So general use of the word health and safety don't relate to questions about a draft public health guide from the WA government that requires submissions. So what is your next question that's related to an item on the agenda, please?
In relation to item 11.2, elected member superannuation, which is on the agenda, and all the councillors here have declared a financial interest, have councillors requested permission from the Minister to participate and vote on this item?
We're not in a position to deal with questions about 11.2 tonight, Mr Maxwell, because we have declared financial interests, and if we had an exemption, we would be in a position tonight to discuss it. Therefore, you can work out from that we haven't an exemption at this time.
I'd ask, have you requested one? I didn't know. Say
Well,
you got one.
I'm not going to discuss item 11.2 because I've declared a financial interest, so I'm not in a position to answer that question on behalf of councillors.
Fair enough. Well then, in regards to 12.1, the tree planting for non-residential developments, what sort of control does the council believe they will have over the retention of the large trees on the property on the corner of Duncan Street and Shepparton Road that was just recently purchased by the state government?
I'll direct that question to the Chief Community Planner, Ms Martin Good.
Through the chair, I don't know whether those trees are on public or private land. Are you aware if they're?
I think we probably need to take that on notice to
take that on notice.
be careful, because I think the really large tree might be on a small apron that belongs to the state government. It's my recollection, as part of the road reserve, might be. But we'll take that on notice, Mr Maxwell, in relation to what we can do with the trees on that land. Try and work out who actually is responsible for those trees, whether it's the new owner of the property or it is someone else. Do you have another question?
In 14.2 financial statements, at the last council meeting, I asked about the Capital Works program. At that point, we were looking at the August accounts, and $2 million out of the $55 million had been expended. And at that point, I suggested that would mean at that rate, we'd only spend $12 million by the end of the year. And I was told that is not the case. Anyway, now we're another month in, so we're 3 months in, and the amount shown in the accounts this month is $3 million, which again points to a $12 million over 12 months. So again, what is the council doing to get that Capital Works program back on track?
I refer that to the Chief Financial Officer, Mr Old.
I can't speak specifically for council, but as administration, you'll note on the agenda we have a $1.8 million tender tonight. There's two tenders, I think, tonight. There is also budget amendments if we are able to fulfil that. However, as administration, we regularly review that list and we go through the procurement process. And again, I note that of that $55 million, there's 20-something million dollars for Lathlane. We know that the issues around that, and there's Ed Millen, which I think is another big chunk. So there's quite a substantial amount taken up by a couple of key projects.
Thanks, Mr Old. Mr Maxwell, do you have
So
another
what was,
question?
could you just elaborate on what the budget amendment is that you referred to?
The Chief Financial Officer was referring to the fact that there are a number of items in tonight's agenda that relate to the Capital Works program for which budget adjustments are being sought due to cost escalations for those projects. They are items 13.1 and 13.2.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr
Yes, you're
Maxwell.
done. Thank you.
Next on the list, Herb Rowe. Mr Rowe, do you have questions that relate to tonight's agenda item? No? All right. There being no other questions from the public gallery, I'll close public participation time at 6:42 p.m. Item 8 on the agenda is presentations. We have none. Item 9 is deputations. We have none. Item 10 is method of dealing with agenda business. So for elected members, I'll go through really quickly the item numbers and names that we've had questions on so far. That we will be seeking to deal with tonight, noting again, as I've already said, we won't be dealing with any questions to do with 11.2. So those items are 12.1, consent to advertise draft Local Planning Policy 39, tree retention, Local Planning Policy 44, significant trees, and Local Planning Policy 45, tree planting for non-residential development. 13.1 is TVP 2419, Burswood Station East, Stage 1A, Styles Griffith Park Upgrade Tender Report. 13.2 TVP 2416, Archer Mint Streetscape and Black Spot Funded Intersections Tender Report. And 14.3 Temporary Parking Changes, Metronet and Archer Mint. Now, are there any of those items that elected members have already submitted questions on that they don't wish to ask anymore? In which case I'll assume they're still on the agenda for people to ask questions about. Are there any other items on the agenda that are not those four that people would like to ask questions about? As we'll add them onto the list now. No? All right, on that basis, we will move on and get started. So we're starting with item 12.1, which is consent to advertise draft local planning policies 39, 44 and 45, which relate to tree retention, significant trees and tree planting on non-residential development. Deputy Mayor Ife, I understand you had some questions.
Thank you. Most of my questions were already answered. I've had a question that has popped up since then, and I apologise that I haven't sent this through. So I appreciate that it may need to be taken on notice. I was just seeking a little bit of clarity around the definition of regulated tree. Each of the points, the definition states, means a living tree that A is 8 metres or more high, and or B and or C. I suppose I'm hoping that I can get some understanding of if, how am I trying to express this? Is there a clearer way that we can ensure that a tree only has to meet one of A, B or C in making that definition?
Direct that question to Ms Martin Good or Mr Hobbs. Mr Hobbs.
Thanks, through you, Mayor. The intent of the wording of the definition of regulated tree is taken directly from the WALGA model template policy, and our understanding is that is the intention, that a tree that meets any one of those criteria qualifies as a regulated tree. I haven't put any thought as to how that could be worded differently to make that clearer, but that is definitely the intent.
Thank you.
Mayor. So I will actually ask, based on that answer, Mr. Hobbs, does that then mean if it's intended that it can meet any of those criteria, then does it really need the word and? Because and sort of suggests this criteria and that one, but if it can simply meet it on its own, wouldn't it just be or and not the and, despite what Walga might have put in their draft? Mr. Hobbs or Ms. Martin-Good?
Yes, on that explanation, I don't see any issue with potentially taking and out, but that's something that we can address through the public advertising period and back for final adoption.
All right. Obviously, Deputy Mayor Ife, that might be one for you to consider whether you think that just makes it clearer.
Thank you. I was already there.
Okay. All right. Are there... yes, Councillor Anderson, you've got some questions about this item. Oops.
I do, thank you, Mayor, and I only sent them through at 5, so I'm happy if they need to be taken on notice. So how will the town monitor compliance post-development to confirm trees are retained or planted according to this policy?
Mr. Hobbs?
So there's some commentary on this in paragraph 27 and 31 of the report, but compliance ultimately is going to be quite difficult for the town to pursue due to various factors, including the reactive nature of planning compliance. Essentially, the town relies a lot of the time on community complaints to respond to. And there's also a requirement for a high standard of evidence to undertake compliance action. And in the case of the removal of a tree, once that tree is gone, it may prove to be quite difficult for us to take compliance action. But that's something that we will just have to deal with as part of the policy if it is adopted.
Councillor Anderson?
Thank you for that response. And my second question, so with that in mind, like, will the town require any additional resources or funding to support the implementation of the policy?
Mr. Hobbs?
Through you, Mayor, the extent of resourcing or funding that may be required to implement the policy is largely unknown at this point in time, and it's going to depend on many factors. This is going to include the number and frequency of tree removal offences, if that's essentially if trees are removed without development approval in accordance with the policy, the level of reporting of offences by the public, and the town's appetite to pursue enforcement, including any prosecutions.
Councillor Anderson?
No, that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from elected members about this particular item? Councillor Melrosa?
I have a couple, but I will put most of them into writing in due course. But in LPP 45 or 45, in 5.1i, it talks about the retained trees. I'm just wondering, like, if a tree is retained and it dies, and yeah, what happens when or if that retained tree dies and it's been used to modify the provisions? Am I being clear?
Mr. Hobbs?
May need to take some of that on notice. The provisions that are within draft local planning policy 45 are actually retained from the town's existing policy, tree planting and retention. So our urban planning officers would probably be able to best advise how that is being implemented in the current policy. We'll be able to explain that further on notice.
The next
All right,
one's
so-
probably, sorry to interrupt
Sorry,
you.
I think we will just make sure that we take that on notice so we can get you a more fulsome answer to your question. Although it looks like Ms. Martin-Good might be able to deal with it.
Through the chair. So, for instance, let's assume we have a planning approval that has a condition that requires the retention of trees. Certainly in the policy it's recognised that trees are finite. they're not infinite in terms of quite often trees will have a certain life. They're not there in perpetuity. So let's assume that condition of a planning approval is there. If they then want to, there's two ways. I'm talking and thinking at the same time. So from a compliance perspective, if the tree dies and there is no compliance inspections to go, oh, well, we issued that planning approval 10 years ago and that tree has now died, I think my answer is nothing will happen. We rely on compliance to be undertaken to a certain extent in a reactive way by neighbours. We don't have the resources to have finite compliance officers going out there and checking all the planning approvals. If planning approval was to be lodged for some type of subsequent development, which we often get, it is standard practice for a planning officer to go through all the previous approvals to see what's relevant. If they then they see on Intramaps, oh, there's a condition of planning approval that required a tree to be retained and it's not there anymore, well then the town will need to consider what it does, whether they take compliance action, whether they require the planting of traditional trees. But that's probably a question that we haven't thought of in terms of long term, because we haven't been at the stage where we've issued lots of planning approvals with these conditions that then the trees have died. So good question.
Thanks. I wasn't sure if I asked it correctly, but look, you got right there. That was exactly what I needed to know. And just one more that I will ask here is in B, all uncovered upgrade parking, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, there's a minimum rate of 1 medium tree for every 4 bays for a car park. Where does that ratio come from?
Mr Hobbs?
Through you, Mayor, that is consistent with the ratio of tree planting in the council's recently adopted local planning policy 23 on car parking. That is also consistent with the recommended rate in the R codes for uncovered parking in residential development. That's what's informed it essentially.
Is it the town's view that that number is able to be changed to increase tree canopy in car bays, or is it set in that way because that is the only amount of trees you can get per 4 bays?
Mr Hobbs?
Through you, Mayor, it's the prerogative of council to potentially set it to a higher or different rate. That has been a rate that has been found in a number of planning instruments that are relatively contemporary. So the work that's gone into why that level of coverage covering car bays is considered reasonable and achievable. But that's definitely not to say a different rate couldn't be pursued.
Maybe quick one to continue on with that. Is there any examples recently in the town where that ratio is not 4 but maybe 2 or 3, and it's successful, I guess, is maybe more to the point?
Ms Martin Good?
Through the chair, I'm not aware of any planning approval that has been issued at a higher rate per bay, but Robert Cruikshank would be someone who I would need to get some confirmation on that. So I'll take some of that on notice, please.
Thanks, that's all for now.
Any other questions in relation to this item? Deputy Mayor Ife?
Just a quick assumption that the lettering of the clauses will be sorted out at 6.1 in LPP 39. Thank you.
We just discussed that with the Acting Manager of Governance and Strategy. So, yes, it will be. Any other questions from other elected members? I do have a question with regards to 6.2, which is the justifications for tree damaging activity which will not be supported. So obviously noting the intention of the policy itself, but with regards to the tree damaging activity that is said where the tree impacts on private gardens, solar installations, swimming pools or the like, So this is 6.2D. Does that mean that a property owner who has, let's say they've purchased the property and there's a tree on the property, but there's also a swimming pool, and you've got an issue where it's a working swimming pool, just for argument's sake, and the tree, like an assessment's made that the tree's root system, for example, is starting to basically erode the integrity of the swimming pool such it's likely to be a significant problem. Where it says that the tree impacts on, for example, swimming pools, that's not going to be considered a justification. It won't be supported. I'm trying to work out where the line is, and I know that I've been a person who's been pretty broad in the sense of let's support trees and let's not have really loose generalised excuses. But what does a person do in a scenario like that where they'd like to keep the tree, but they'd also like to keep the swimming pool, but they've got this real problem, and what they're trying to say is we need to do some maybe tree damaging activity because otherwise we're potentially going to have a huge problem on our hands. Like, how will we deal with that if we're as prescriptive as this around things like this? And it might not just be swimming pools, because it does say or the like. There could be something else. I'm trying to work that out. Mr. Hobbs?
Yes, through you, Mayor. So I'm just trying to locate the provision, but there are other provisions within the policy of exemptions for works, for protecting things for structural integrity and public safety and the like. I would be of the assumption that that trumps any amenity aspect, that I think those justifications that are excluded as not being to support removal of a tree in regards to solar installation, obviously being overshadowing in swimming pools, is probably more related to leaf litter and maintenance rather than a structural risk. So I think the application of the policy would pragmatically apply the exemptions and the other considerations in that priority order.
Would it be of more assistance if that clause referred to justifications will not generally be supported? So either that or it refers back to the subject to 6.1 above, these justifications won't be supported, because when you say something will not be supported and then it's trying to be dealt with by town staff, it can get a little bit muddy potentially if people are arguing about what it means or what it doesn't mean. We're just looking at that. I know we're going to advertise it, but if we've got an opportunity to perhaps make this clear before it gets advertised, then people might have less concerns when they read it. I don't know, is that something we could give consideration to?
Yes, absolutely. I don't see any issue with the insertion of generally there. It's definitely an option.
Ms. Martin, good?
Through the chair, if I could just add to that, with any planning policy, there is always the exercise of discretion. And when I say the exercise of discretion, I don't mean that in a way that would significantly erode the principles of the policy. But in any local government that I've worked in, there is always some discretion that is exercised with policy. So it would be entirely consistent with that general exercise of discretion to include the words such as generally to provide that clarification.
I have another question that relates to this for the reasons for tree damaging activity if it's being proposed. It says the following will be given due regard in the assessment process. And in actual fact, it was a member of the public who joined us at the start of this meeting that prompted me to remember this. They led a petition for the removal of a number of trees on Star Street, because those trees were having an adverse impact on the health and well-being of some of the residents on that street, including children, because those particular trees actually drop a seed that splinters into thousands of little shards, and they were actually causing like irritations and cuts on children particularly. Has any consideration been given within any of these criteria to separate completely to possible safety risks due to tree limb failure and infrastructure or structural damage associated with retaining the tree, that one of the factors might be if the tree was known to cause, for example, allergic reactions or possibly worse. I'm wanting to make sure that we've tried to consider the myriad of factors that might be at play when someone is proposing a tree damaging activity, that we've got enough grounds in our policy that we can consider, or is the town staff of the view that that's not an accepted regular factor that might be considered? Mr. Hobbs?
Through you, Mayor, I think the discussion of the previous item of introducing generally to provision 6.2 will generally not be supported would capture that scenario, so that generally allergies would not be considered, but in certain circumstances it may prove some influence on decision making. But I don't think separating out this policy already does attempt to separate out all the possible considerations for tree removal and why it may be justified or not, by setting some expectations around what reasons would not generally be supported, is to hopefully capture those ones that are commonly offered as reasons to remove a tree that in the town's view are not a valid planning reason to remove a tree.
So at the moment, it would appear that the draft policies don't have a position on health and safety of people. Mr. Hobbs?
Through you, Mayor, where tree damaging activity is proposed in item 6.1 above, the first point A is given due regard to health, maturity, species and location of the tree. Well, not specifically, I would say species somewhat captures the physical attributes of that species and what it might do by way of dropping nuts or anything like that. So I think that is something that was given due regard by the policy.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Hobbs, I think you might have misunderstood me. I was talking about health and safety of people, not the tree. So this says due regard will be given to the health of the tree, the maturity of this tree, the species of the tree and the location of the tree. I'm talking about whether due regard would be given in the assessment process to health and safety impacts on humans from that tree. That's what I was more meaning.
Through the chair, clause 6.2e does talk about allergies as a reason where tree damaging activity would not be supported. If the council was of the mind to delete that, then that would be open for you. But the way that it's worded at the moment, it's saying that allergies is not a reason to justify tree damaging activity.
Sorry, Mayor, in addition to that, just take my time to find it, under exemptions 4.1, tree damaging activity requires development or approval except in any of the following circumstances. Point C is public safety.
I do understand that, Mr. Hobbs, but I think you'll find that the traditional understanding of public safety is one where the tree is likely to actually fall and create a risk to general public safety rather than personal safety, as in, like, I'm now talking about specifically health related to safety, not safety from a falling branch. I'm actually talking about if a person has a medical condition and it turns out their medical condition, for example, is exacerbated or caused by their proximity to a particular tree species. At the moment, that's not something we would appear under this draft policy to have any due regard to. And if their problem was allergy related, which can actually be serious to the point of being fatal for some people, allergies would be something that we would not support as a justification. That's how I read the policy at the moment. So I take Ms. Martin-Good's point. Yes, allergies could be removed, but it doesn't appear that due regard is being had to, like, health and well-being of humans as one of the factors that might be considered in a tree damaging activity application kind of process. So I think I understand what's not there. All right. Are there any other questions from people about these policies? Councillor Hamer.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Just on that allergy point, I've got a neighbour's tree, which is Cape Lilac, which has large numbers of caterpillars coming from year to year. So that'd be an extension of allergies where there's an infestation of another caterpillar, which is a host of the tree. So my neighbour would then be not allowed to trim the tree down or do anything harming to the tree because of the caterpillars, or where would that fall in that policy?
Mr. Hobbs.
So through you, Mayor, the things that are captured in the policy to be given regard are the entire list of things to be considered in development approval as to whether the tree should be removed or not. So that could be a factor that is put in with the development application. If that was the only factor given for removal of the tree, I would suggest that that would not be treated with a lot of regard. But that's not to say that in consideration with other things that can be considered as part of the application to remove or damage that tree would add into that decision.
Councillor Hamer, anything further?
Can I just have a definition of damaging tree, just to be clear, of where that line was between pruning and managing and, other stuff?
Mr. Hobbs.
Through you, Mayor, so this is in the policy's definition. So tree damaging activity means the killing or destruction of a tree and or the removal of a tree and or the severing of branches, limbs, stems or trunks of a tree and or the ring barking, topping or lopping of a tree and or any other substantial damage to a tree. Sorry, can I just add to that though? Quite importantly, in addition to that, there is a definition for maintenance pruning, which means pruning that involves the removing of dead or diseased wood only, or is of a fruit tree and done for fruit production, or is otherwise minor maintenance pruning or thinning of the crown that does not adversely affect the health or general appearance of the tree.
My question is more around if we have a green rubbish collection on the annual basis, does this sort of confuse residents of how much they can actually do in that space if we've got a definition of tree harming, which is, sounds like you really can't do much to a tree, so we won't be, our expected tonnage of green rubbish out would be obviously declined if this was implemented town-wide. Is that a risk?
Mr. Hobbs.
Through you, Mayor, so the definition of maintenance pruning is something that has been modified from the WALGA policy. Elected members may remember at the workshops we held on this that the WALGA policy had very prescriptive details as to what constituted maintenance pruning. It had definitions of the branch size you were allowed to cut and a number of other things. By consolidating that into the last point of maintenance pruning, which I note the numbering is out on that as well. Otherwise, minor maintenance or thinning of the crown that does not adversely affect the health or general appearance of the tree. I definitely appreciate that the last part, general appearance of the tree, may cause that confusion, but the intent was to move away from affecting the ability of residents to maintain vegetation on their property, but to really target the removal and destruction of trees. That's how we've tried to direct this policy, and if there's any opportunity to modify the clauses to make that clearer, we're absolutely open to pursuing it.
Just one more question around that. If the tree was the neighbour's tree, but obviously the branch is extended over to the property line, would the property owner whose the tree branches are in have to comply with that same policy, or would it only be the tree owner's responsibility to maintain that requirement because it's not their tree?
Mr. Hobbs.
My understanding is that the way this is policy is written and the regulation of trees of private land, by requiring the works as development approval, it is whoever's undertaking those works more so than the landowner. So if you are, so the landowner who has the tree on their property is not conducting the works, they don't need to apply for the approval. It would be the applicant to undertake the works, being you as the neighbour, to cut a tree if it was works that required development approval. But again, it's important to note the size of regulated tree that this applies to and the level of works that may be considered exempt under the policy.
Councillor Hamer.
Thanks. So on that scenario, if the neighbour had a solar panel or a swimming pool, they would have to apply to trim a branch that was shading their pool or their solar panel, which was not on their property, off their neighbour's property.
Mr Hobbs.
If the works qualified as requiring development approval, yes, although that scenario I would think would be limited, given it would need to be a regulated tree, which in the first instance is a tree over 8 metres in height, and the works to remove the branch would need to be deemed not exempt under the maintenance pruning definition. So that scenario would require quite substantial tree damaging activity to be occurring to require that neighbour to make application.
Councillor Hamer, anything further? No? Any other questions remaining about these three policies? Councillor Cruiser.
Thank you. Could you just explain a little bit more the exemption at 4.1J that it is exempted if the tree damaging activity is a public work?
Mr Hobbs.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. So public works in the definition of a policy is generally where it's being undertaken by a public service provider, so Watercorp or Western Power. I'm not sure if Main Roads, some of their works might occur, but this policy does relate to trees on private land. So it would need to be, if they were undertaking those public works for some form of infrastructure on private land, in that case, it may qualify as being exempt.
A further question on that then, if there was work being done that required tree damaging activity by Main Roads or the Watercorp, does that mean that we wouldn't have any mechanism to stop them from undertaking that activity, or is it just not within the scope of this policy?
Mr Hobbs.
Through the chair, there is separate legislation that exempts public works. There is a very long planning bulletin that I had to read several times before I understood it. But in short, if it exempt works, there is nothing the town can do to stop that.
All right. Lucky last time. Any other questions about this item? No? All right, thank you. We will move on that basis to item 13.1. It's the item we're going to move on to next, which is the tender for Burswood Station East Stage 1A Styles Griffith Park upgrade tender report. Do we have any questions in relation to this one? I'll go to you, Councillor Anderson, first, because I sent through a longish list of questions, but I think I only got the answers to a short time ago.
I've got my response via email, and I'm happy with that, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I will ask a number of my questions with regards to this one. So page 35 of the officer's report refers to the endorsed concept design. Has the concept design for this upgrade been approved by council, and if so, where can the details be accessed for it? So I'm going to direct that question to our strategic project manager, Mr. Check.
Through the chair. Thank you. Yes, the concept design has been endorsed as part of the LPP 40, which includes the design for the concept of the public realm upgrade for Burswood Station East. The original landscape plan can be found in the link that is attached to the questions. Yeah.
Right, thank you. There's a reference to lighting in the report. Can you advise how many lights are planned and what type of lighting, given that I note that lighting as part of wayfinding towards the station is noted as a key outcome for this project? Mr. Check.
Through the chair, thank you. Yes, the lighting plan is included in the tender documentation of the Griffith Styles Park upgrade. It contains 7 poles of 4.5 meter mounted with LED parks lights focused on a footpath and a park access point with careful consideration for a tree canopy coverage. Thank you.
Thank you. I am trying to have a look now at the lighting plan that was sent through with the email. Because I wasn't able to determine from the document that was in the agenda papers exactly where the lighting would be located. So perhaps, Mr. Check, if you have access to that document just as I'm trying to look at it now, are you able to tell me if each of the symbols, which are triangles, are intended to depict the proposed lighting throughout the park? Is that what's the case? And sorry, I'm only getting the chance to have a look at this. Mr. Check, if you know where the lighting is supposed to be, happy for you to
Through the
let us
chair,
know.
yes. Fortunately, I don't have the lighting plan with me, but I can provide you this information. There is a legend on the top right corner showing the light poles.
Yes, I think I've located them. They've got numbers that go with them. Yep. Okay. All right. So currently at the moment there's no lighting poles that appear to be inside the middle of the park, where it appears you've got a seating wall, I think is the design feature that goes in towards the middle of the park, and there doesn't look like there's any lighting particularly anywhere close to the seating wall. Is that your understanding?
Through the chair, yes. A lighting design has been undertaken with our consultant, with primary focus on the footpath, but also on the seating. So even though there is no direct lighting near the seating, there are lights located along the footpath, whether it's along Griffiths Street or the footpath next to the seating wall, and the lighting levels have been. The lighting simulation has been done to ensure that sufficient lighting is provided for the seating area.
All right, thank you. So I guess my other question about the lighting, looking at this plan now, is, would it not be usual for the lighting to be at least located somewhere close to the footpath entrances to the park? Because I notice at the Styles Avenue end of the park, where the footpath appears to come down and go towards a split so that pedestrians or users can go either side. Like, there's no lighting anywhere near to that area. So Mr. Acting CEO suggests that there might be a street light in that location. Like, are we trying to take advantage of street lights? Because otherwise, to me, it looks like it would be quite dark as you try to enter into the park or exit it. Mr. Check.
Through the chair, yeah, that's correct. So lighting design has been done considering existing lights around the intersection. And in this particular location, the existing lights offer adequate lighting for the crossing point or the entrance to the park.
All right, thank you. What park furniture is proposed to be included? For example, things like water fountains, rubbish bins, any other park furniture items that we might normally expect to see? Mr. Check.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through the chair, yes, the main street furnitures are bike racks and wayfinding signage, which are included in the current stage. Other furniture such as water fountains, rubbish bins, and seatings are also included, but as part of the overall project, but form part of the next stage of the park redevelopment project, which is at this stage planned next financial year.
Thank you. I do note, I think the answer that was sent through by email late this afternoon indicated that, and I'm quoting now, these items were deferred to the next stage due to budget considerations. So I just want to make sure I'm clear. We're going to be building seating in the middle of the upgrade to encourage people to sit in the park area, but we're not going to be providing any rubbish bins or any water fountains despite having bicycling infrastructure to encourage people to cycle there. I'm trying to work out what's the rationale for leaving those kind of supporting infrastructure to a later stage of the project. Is it just the budget considerations? Mr. Check.
Through the chair, yes, at this stage, it's mainly budget. However, there is some opportunities to potentially include any sittings along the footpath, if possible. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I had a question about the seating wall, and so I'm looking at attachment 13.1.3, which is the landscape plan, and the question that I had submitted was, how do people gain access to use the seating wall when, by my reading of the landscape plan, the seating wall is right in the middle of the turf? So if you're a person with mobility issues or a mother pushing a pram or an e-scooter user, do you have to go over the turf in order to sit on the seating wall? Because it doesn't appear like any of the footpaths actually go right up to the seating wall, let alone alongside the seating wall on either side. Mr. Check.
Through the chair, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we actually look at this item as part of the tender evaluation process, and we included an item to include connections from the main footpath back to the seating wall to ensure full access from the footpath to the seating wall. So the proposed work will also include connection points linking the seating wall to the main footpath, ensuring that there's a full access from the entrance to the footpath to the seating wall.
All right, thank you. So is that currently shown on the landscape plan and I haven't seen it, or that's going to be put onto the landscape plan?
Through the chair, yes, it will be.
Okay, all right, good. I just wanted to be really clear about that because I did notice that some of the landscaping works down at the causeway near the new bridge, I noticed they had plinths ready to have bench seats put on them, but they were surrounded by large tracts of turf. And so the only way to be able to get to the seating bench is if you're capable of walking over the turf, which might be challenging for some people and wouldn't be considered to be universally accessible. So I'm glad to hear that that will be part of the plan that is proposed to go forward. Thank you. My next question was in terms of attachment 13.1.9, this is one that actually lists itemised costings for this project. And together for the cost of the seating wall and the timber battens, which are listed as two separate items, that comes to $45,846. So my question is, from the attachment where it's proposed to see what that would look like if it was removed, why is the estimated cost of removal in there for the seating wall stated to only be $35,500 when the total cost of the seating wall is $45,846? Mr. Check.
Through the chair, thank you, Madam Mayor. So the difference is due to earthwork cost required to adjust the levels to the surrounding area to tie in with the proposed design.
Okay. All right, I might need to think about that some more. If the seating wall were to be removed as part of the plan, how many park benches of a traditional nature could be installed instead of a seating wall design? Mr. Check.
Through the chair. So if the seating wall was to be removed, we could potentially install between 4 to 5 benches in this location. However, I just draw the attention that one of the important features of the seating wall, it actually serves two purposes. One, it provides obviously an important amenity for the area, but it's also a retaining wall. This structure is essential for managing levels and enable the next stage of the park upgrade with a future multi-use court. So yeah, it will be something that is required as part of the next stage, and that's why the reason to have this feature in the current scope.
All right, thank you. I noticed that reference was also made to handrails. Can you advise what are the handrails for and how many handrails are in the design? Because I can't see them from the landscaping plan, Mr. Check.
Through the chair. Yes, so the design includes one handrail located on the retaining wall along Griffiths Stiles, which is 40 millimeters diameter and features some skate deterrent dome caps as well.
Okay, thank you. I note there's also reference to bollards. Are bollards necessary for that little local park? Mr. Check.
Through the chair, thank you. Yeah, bollards are needed to address the current issue of verge parking in the area. We noticed in consultation with the parks team that there were in some occasion number of vehicles parked on the verge, and from a safety perspective, we want to ensure that pedestrian can access safely to the park, and also we want to ensure we have adequate sightline for people getting out of the park. So the bollards serve that purpose.
Thank you. If I can just ask then for a clarification, because when I've been over there, I've noticed all the people who do park on the verge of or edge of our park. Will these bollards mean that there'll be no more parking around the edges of the park, or will they just make a more, I guess, clear, like, division between where the park is and where people might, so that stopping people parking their cars further in? If that makes sense, Mr. Check?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Yes, exactly. So the intent is to assist in the formalization of parking, which at the moment is a problem in the area. So in consultation with our parking management, parking team, we are looking to address this issue with the installation of bollards, but also looking at through the parking management plan to formalize parking in this area as well.
All right, thank you. I note there isn't any public art proposed in this project, but am I right in understanding that's going to be coming at a future stage of the development, Mr. Check?
Through the chair, yes, public art, is an important feature of this project, and it was highlighted during the consultation. So this is an item which is included as part of the next stage of the design for the phase 1B, which will include the multi-use court and also inclusion of art. So there'll be further engagement with council and key stakeholders to look at art, what type of art, what location we'll be looking at as part of the next stage of the design for this project.
Okay, thank you. And with regards to the tender price that's being proposed, I note that that is an additional $210,000 more than the original budget for this project of $540,000. Can you explain what has caused the tender price to increase by that additional $210,000, Mr. Check?
Through the chair, thank you. Yes, so the tender price, the increase in the tender price was mainly driven by two factors: the lighting component and the irrigation. So the lighting with was one of the installation of those light poles and a type of poles that were selected was one of the key element of this price increase. And the second item is the irrigation works.
All right, thank you. My final question relates to that part of the officer's recommendation for council to approve the additional funding to come from the Future Fund reserve, and noting that the purpose of the Future Fund is to assist in funding initiatives and purchases that diversify the revenue streams of council, something I note has been raised by other elected members recently. How does this particular capital project meet the purpose of the Future Fund reserve? Happy for that to be answered either by you, Mr. Check, or by Mr. Old. Is that a question for the Chief Financial Officer? Mr. Check, I'm being told by the acting CEO, so you're in the hot seat for that one, Mr. Check.
No problem. Through the chair, so the park is currently has a unique opportunity. It's one of the, it's the key public open space, and it's extremely valuable for the area. Upgrading the park will not only encourage more visitors in the area. We have currently the Blasta Brewery, which recently opened, and the Fox Friday. And by upgrading this park, we will encourage more people to walk and enjoy the amenity and contribute to local economies. And additionally, it's important to understand that there's also a need in this area in terms of upgrading this park, which could potentially encourage future developers in the area. Looking at the park, it's it's also an opportunity for them to look at the precinct and redevelop this area, which form part of a mixed-use precinct as part of local planning policy 40. So on this end, it will really, I think, encourage a more vibrant precinct and encourage more development.
All right, thanks, Mr. Check. I have a question for Mr. Old. The additional $210,000 that's being proposed, could that come from the Future Projects Reserve Fund instead of from the Future Fund Reserve? Mr. Old?
Mayor, if memory serves me, the other item on tonight's agenda is taken from the Future Projects Reserve, and I can take that on notice because I don't think there's going to be enough left in that reserve for both projects, but I'll officially take that on notice and we'll clarify that.
Thank you. I think it was more to the point that the Future Projects Reserve, I think, is to assist council in funding capital initiatives that are of significant value, which is different to the purpose of the Future Fund Reserve. So noting, yes, that it's being proposed to take money out of it for a different purpose, we're just trying to get clear that it is potentially a suitable match for funding for this type of project. Is that right?
Yes, correct, Mayor. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Councillor Anderson, you had some questions?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Mayor Vernon. On reflection, I would like to have my question on public record and to get a response. So when the design was initially presented to the Access and Inclusion Committee, it was noted that stairs were included in the park layout. So during the meeting, there was further discussion about removing the stairs and adjusting the land gradient to incorporate a ramp instead. So looking at the designs, it's not entirely clear in the attachment if this has been removed and a ramp added. And it was also discussed, it was a similar type of idea which happened at Kulbari Park, where the first design was stairs and then they were removed for a ramp. So my question is around not just being considered for the next phase, but will this be going ahead in the design?
Mr. Check?
Through the chair, thank you. Yes, so the feasibility of replacing the stairs with a direct ramp will be assessed as we progress through the next stage of the detailed design. So this is an item that we will look as part of this stage when we will be looking at the design for the multi-use court. One thing probably also to highlight is there are some significant level impact, which could potentially a technical challenge to ensure that we have compliance with the gradient requirements. So we will have to consider the existing topography to ensure that we have proper access as well. But this is an item that we will look as part of the detailed design for the next stage.
Councillor Anderson?
Thank you for that.
All right. So I would just like to be clear though, Mr. Check. So are you saying that the stairs will be replaced with ramps in the next stage? You're not suggesting that stairs are going to be installed now and then later taken out to be replaced by ramps, are you?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
So stairs are going in and then we're going to take them out
No.
to the next stage? No?
No, through the chair. No, there are no stairs planned as part of this this scope of work.
Right. Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions about this item? Councillor Cruiser.
Yes, could you please, following up on some email replies we had, talk more about why the railing has gate deterrent dome caps?
Mr. Check?
Through the chair, I will probably have to take that on notice.
All right. We'll take that on notice. So that will end up in the further consideration part of the report to council. You did say skate deterrent, meaning what? People can't bump their skateboard up onto the rail and... Right, got it. That's what I was thinking you were meaning. Okay. Anything further, Councillor Cruiser?
More generally, do we take an approach to parks and other public areas where we do generally install skate deterrent measures?
Refer that to the acting CEO.
Through you, Mayor Vernon, thanks for the question. It's horses for courses, so there has been in the past in some developments and in other areas that hasn't been. So there is no standard policy of the town that we follow where skate deterrent features are used all of the time. It's been from time to time we choose different types of parks.
Anything further, Councillor Cruiser?
Following up in this case then, could we get more information on why we currently have skate deterrent measures scheduled for this park, the reasoning behind it, and whether it's necessary?
Mr. Check, is that one that you'd like to take on notice?
Yes, definitely.
All right, we'll take that one on notice. Thanks, Councillor Cruiser. Any other questions about Styles Griffith Reserve, this project? Councillor Hamer.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Just on the Future Fund Reserve question, is the reason why this fund has been selected due to the insufficient funds of the probably more better suited fund, or does the officers think that the criteria for the Future Fund does fit this project?
Mr. Old?
Through you, Chair. So the initial budget, or prior to requesting this additional budget amount, is being funded from the Future Fund Reserve as it stands. And as I recall, part of the reasoning for that is to improve potentially improve the amenity of the area, therefore increase in value in land and potentially a greater rate take, or as the other officer mentioned, development, and we maybe get fees from that. So that was the methodology for picking that fund in the first place. The reason we're choosing the Future Fund now is because we used the Future Fund in the first place. So to confine it to that, but I just checked the current financial report, and with the other tender that's gone up, at this point we don't anticipate there'll be enough fund in the Future Project Reserve, which goes back to your earlier question. But I can confirm that balance prior to the OCM.
Anything further, Councillor Hamer? No? All right. So if there are no further questions in relation to 13.1, we're going to move on to 13.2, which is TVP 2416, Archer Mint Streetscape and Black Spot Funded Intersections Tender Report. So we've got some questions that have been requested about this. Councillor Devereux, I understand you've got some questions you'd like to ask.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. I just wanted to ask, given the significant work and interest and activities lately related to active transport and the bike bus and safe routes to schools, could we hear if, in addition to the raised road pieces at Beatty and Hubert Street, what consultation has been had with the East Vic Park School to make sure any additional appropriate consideration and consultation has been made to make the best use of the changes, including the road raisings, to be in sync with the school plans to encourage active transport?
I'm going to direct that question to Mr. Check.
Through Chair, thank you. Yes, so the town has engaged in extensive consultation with the East Victoria Park Primary School, the Department of Transport, Main Roads, and other key stakeholders regarding the proposed race design. This collaborative approach included also a site visit on Beatty Avenue during peak hours to observe key constraints and ensure that the project addresses the need for a slow speed environment and also improved the crossing condition for students, particularly along Beatty Avenue. Regarding additional opportunities to maximize benefits, the town, in partnership with a DOT and the school, the East Victoria Park Primary School, is actively working through the Your Move program to encourage and facilitate greater participation in active travel among students.
Thank you. Can I ask a further question, just if we know the current level of active travel amongst students at the school? Do we have any indication at the current state?
Mr. Check.
Through the chair, I will probably have to take that on notice.
We'll take that on notice. Councillor Devereux.
Can I also just ask, in relation to the mention of actively working through the Your Move program to encourage and facilitate the greater participation, are there any specific measures that are being pursued in that regard?
Mr. Check.
Through the chair, yes, I will probably have to take that on notice as well in terms of measure to encourage more active participation or more increased participation, in terms of students.
Councillor Devereux, do you want that taken on notice?
Yes, I think that was the indication that further detail would come, I think. Is that right?
Well, I understood Mr. Check to say he would have to take that on notice. Are you wanting that taken on notice?
Yes, please.
Yep, we'll take that on notice.
Second question as well. Given the community queries about the implementation of the Archer Street Carlisle Town Centre upgrade compared to the original plan, for example, related to the Bishopsgate roundabout, which was originally going to be raised to slow traffic and then wasn't, or the minimal speeding decrease that's achieved to date, is it possible to see the exact drawings to see what is exactly committed to for this section covered by the tender?
Mr. Check.
Through the chair, yes, drawings will be provided for your review as well.
So just to clarify, Mr. Check, will they be provided with the agenda before this matter comes to ordinary council meeting in 2 weeks' time?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, thank you. Councillor Devereux?
That's great. That will be very helpful. Thanks.
All right. Are there any other questions that people have with regards to this particular item? So I did send through a list of questions about this item, but I haven't received any responses, so that might be because there hasn't been sufficient time for those to be raised, but I'll ask them now because I don't know how many of them you need to take on notice. The first question is, why are there no drawings showing the works that's going to be undertaken for stage 2? Mr. Check.
Through the chair, I'll probably take that on notice, if possible.
Right, we'll take that on notice. My second question is, why does the officer report not contain any narrated details about what work is to be undertaken for stage 2 of the Archer Mint Street improvement project? Mr. Check.
If possible, I would like to take that on notice as well.
All right, thank you. We'll take that on notice. Next question, when is the town contemplating that stage 3 of this project will be completed? Mr. Check.
If I can take that on notice as well.
All right, we'll take that on notice. Next question, given that the main metro networks are said to be on track to have the railway line open in 2025, is there an opportunity to minimise further disruptive works on Archer Street by trying to complete stage 2 and stage 3 as soon as possible, rather than leaving them separate? Mr. Check.
If possible, I would like to take this question on notice as well.
Sure, take that on notice. My next question, what has led to the cost increases that are identified for this project? So noting that there's a smallish increase to Part A of the works, there are bigger increases to Parts B and C, namely the raised intersections at the 2 locations. Mr. Check?
If possible, I would like to take this on notice.
Yep, we'll take that on notice. Next question, the costs of parts B and C, which are the two raised intersections at Beatty Ave and Hubert Street, are considerably more than the capital works budget that was approved by council in July. Is there a reason why there's such a difference between the estimate given by the town to go in the budget and the tender price for those two particular raised intersections? Mr. Check?
Through the chair, if possible, I would like to take this on notice as well.
That's fine, we can take that on notice. Next question, has the town recently reviewed its estimating process to identify improvements in accurately costing capital works projects such as these? Mr. Check?
If possible, I would like to take this on notice as well.
Thank you. And my final question is it possible for council to consider proceeding with only part of the proposed tender works rather than all of them, given that they all come with budget adjustments required, which exceed our approved budget? Mr. Check?
Through the chair, if possible, I would like to take this question on notice as well.
All right, we'll take that question on notice, thanks. Are there any other questions about this project, this particular item on the agenda? Councillor Devereux?
Just picking up on some of those questions, I wonder, I had a couple that sort of emerged from them. One was just if the works aren't completed as proposed, would there be any impacts on the efficacy of the overall project if it
Mr.
wasn't done
Check.
as the package that's current? Sorry.
Mr. Check?
If possible, I would like to take this question on notice.
Take that on notice. Anything further, Councillor Devereux?
Yes, and I just wanted to ask if, I know when we originally discussed this project, there had been some state government funds that had been available for bike, I can't remember what it was called, but there was a bike program that was then eliminated, and I just wondered if we're aware of new funding that may be available for bike infrastructure from the state government that we might be able to get in a matching sense.
Refer that to the acting CEO.
Yeah, for a period of time, the West Australian Bike Network grant program was put on hold as it was redesigned, and it has been released back out for local governments to access. And the major change was that it was for bike infrastructure in close proximity to Metronet stations. So luckily for us, that ensures that our project is still eligible.
Councillor Devereux?
Last one, just picking up on Mayor Vernon's suggestion of the possibility of completing the two stages sooner rather than later. Would that be possible to be considered in next year's budget?
Mr. Acting CEO?
Yes, it is possible to be considered, but administration will be working through its budget preparations for next financial year over the coming months, which will be something that will be discussed and ultimately presented to council as part of the budget process.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Devereux. I'm going to do a follow-up question from Councillor Devereux about the grant funding. So noting, Mr. Acting CEO, that you said that that program is now back out and available and our project appears to qualify, is the town looking to apply for some funding from that program for stage 2? Mr. Check?
Through the chair, yes, we applied for the next round of the WABAN grant for the section between Raleigh and Hubert Street, which form part of the continuation of this protected bike lane.
And do we know when we're likely to hear about that application for funding, Mr. Check?
Through the chair, at this stage, we expect to have the outcome of the for this WABAN grant by November. So we're still waiting for the formal feedback from Department of Transport, but at this stage it's November.
Okay, so to be clear, it wouldn't apply to stage 2 that we're considering for the tender, it would apply to the later stage, is that right?
Through the chair. Yes, that's correct.
All right, thank you. All right, are there any other questions about this item? Councillor Devereux.
Last chance. Given the opening of the protected bike path at the other end of Archer that we just had recently, and there was a survey attached to that, and I just wondered whether there were any results from that survey that give us an indication of the community perceptions after that opening event when 6 of the 9 councillors turned up on bikes, which was amazing.
Thanks, Councillor Devereux. Mr Check, you probably want to take that one on notice. I don't know that you have access to any of that information to hand.
Through the chair, yes, we will have to discuss with our stakeholder relation team to look at this information, and we'll come back to you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Councillor Devereux. Any last questions on this item? No. In that case, we have got... What's the one that was left? 13, we are at 14.3, temporary parking changes, Metronet and Archer Mint Street. So I had indicated that I had some questions about this, and just everybody give me 2 seconds till I find the questions that were sent through. So I suppose these were just a couple of questions with regards to attachment 14.3.1 depicts 2 permanent no parking directional signs to be installed at each of the eastern side of Milford Street, and paragraph 20 of the report indicates that after the temporary diversion, on-street parking is going to return to its original position. Could we please have an indication of what's the intention for the new permanent signs, given that the map shows a bunch of temporary signs, but 2 permanent signs new and only on the one eastern side? Mr. Old?
The town's review of current parking provisions on Milford Street as part of Metronet's request for temporary parking changes has highlighted missing permanent signs. The 2 proposed permanent signs are needed to properly depict an existing no stopping restriction on the corners of those respective streets, as per the existing yellow line marking. Council endorsement for these 2 signs is not required, as this is a maintenance issue. They are shown on the plan for information purposes only.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, based on paragraphs 28 through to 31 of the report, does the content of those paragraphs mean that the town has not notified the local property owners and occupiers of the commercial premises along Milford Street that there are going to be temporary parking restrictions proposed to be introduced? Mr. Old?
The town has not undertaken any consultation or issued any notifications to the local property owners or occupiers. On approval of this item, town will update Metronet, and they will commence the process of notifying impacted businesses and the broader community via various communication channels or methods. Metronet has advised they will provide notifications to the community in early December.
Thanks, Mr. Old. It's a bit of a follow-up question, obviously noting that the answer had been provided to me for this question. But given that Milford Street currently, you've got people parking on both sides of the road there, accessing not only those local businesses but working in them all day, every day, because it's a heavy commercial area, is there a reason why we haven't considered it advisable to go out and let those business owners know that there will be a period of time where temporarily anyway there's only going to be one side of the street available for parking, completely separate to what Metronet's doing with regards to the diversion? Mr. Old?
Mayor, that detailed question, I have to take that on notice to get the parking team to respond.
Thank you. If we can take that on notice. And my final question is, has the town consulted with local businesses on Archer Street, and I mean now the town centre area, about the proposed introduction of temporary parking restrictions in car park number 47, Mr. Old?
Businesses were consulted by the Archer Mint project team during the previous Archer Mint Street works, and the implementation of 1P parking was very well received. Concessions to some businesses through the provision of temporary permits allowed 2P parking were provided by the parking team on request, for example, the hair salon business. Further information will be provided in writing to affected businesses about the parking changes and available options as part of the Archer Mint Street project communications plan.
Thank you. Are there any other questions about this item? No? Looks like there's no other questions about this item. That's the last of the items on the agenda report that we were looking to request information on. So on that basis, we'll move on to item 15 on the agenda, which is committee reports. There are none. Item 16, motion of which previous notice has been given. There is none. Item 17 is public participation time, which I now open at 8 p.m, but note there are no members of the public left in the public gallery, so I close it at 8 p.m. Item 18, questions from members without notice on general matters. Are there any questions? General matters, no notice. Councillor Hamer.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. General questions about the Archer Street speed bumps that have been installed. Am I right in the size of those being 75 millimetres? That's the answer we got back.
I'm going to direct that question to the Acting Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Wong.
Thank you, through the Mayor. That is our understanding, 75 millimetre. But if I may, I'll take that on notice and confirm. There have been cases where we have installed 50 millimetres as well. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so we'll take that on notice so we can get that confirmed. Thank you.
And is there a desired speed that vehicles are supposed to be traversing these speed bumps, and does that change with the size of the speed bumps?
All right, direct that back to Mr. Wong.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, may I ask for a repeat of the question?
Sure.
Again, sorry.
Is there a desired speed for people to approach one of these speed bumps at, and does that speed change according to the size, meaning the height of the speed bump?
I will have to take that on notice as well.
Yep.
There is definitely a desired speed going across, but the actual speed designed for it, I will have to check and come back to you.
We can take that on notice.
Sure. The reason my question is obviously the speed limit of the area, has that been suited to the size of the speed bump fitted? So they can take it on notice. And the follow-up question was, what's the depth of a pothole that needs to be before it is repaired in the road?
Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you. Through the Chair, whenever we've noticed a pothole, it doesn't matter how deep it is, for us to retain the quality or the structural integrity of the asphalt layer, we will repair it. The problem with potholes is that it doesn't matter how deep it is. Once water has ingress into the underlying pavement layer, even a very shallow pothole can still cause serious damage to the pavement, especially during the wetter months of the year. So we will, the maintenance crew will repair them. Doesn't matter what depth it is. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. And just following on that, obviously the potholes are repaired to maintain the integrity of the road, but obviously there's and also another motivation to stop damage to vehicles as well, or is more just the making sure the road doesn't get too beaten up?
Mr. Wong?
Yep, thank you, through the Chair. Yep, that is correct, especially for cyclists. There is a need to ensure that those potholes are repaired as soon as possible. We've had, for example, people crossing the street, pedestrian tripping over, even 10 mil of a pothole or cracks on the road. There are serious concerns as well. So we have to repair them as soon as possible. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hamer. Any other general questions without notice? Councillor Melrosa.
A couple on Archer Street, given the theme. How often is the cleaning regime for the bike lanes in terms of sweeping? When is the line marking going to be complete? And there's about 5 locations where the curbs are seriously damaged at this point, and it's only been open a couple of months. Whose responsibility is to fix that? And
Sorry, Councillor Melrosa, I'm going to get you to break them down. That's just too many. We'll end up going back and repeating them. So let's try doing them one at a time for a start. So going to your first point, how often are the protected bicycle lanes swept? It's the first question. Mr. Wong.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. If I may, I'll take that on notice.
All right, we'll take that on notice, Councillor Melrosa. And your next question?
the line marking, when will that be complete?
Line marking on Archer Street, complete. Date, Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Again, yeah, I may ask for
All right,
that
we'll
to be
take that
taken
on notice.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Your third question?
The curbing is damaged. Whose responsibility is to fix it? And it's the same question, sort of, but at what point will it not be, because I'm assuming it's the contractor, at what point will the town have to start repairing that stuff?
Mr. Wong, is that another one to take on notice?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe just quickly, I would just say that you're right. We have to check the contract performance, whether it's a workmanship issue or specification problem. So I can't provide an answer now. We will have to take that on notice and come back to you. Yeah,
Alternatively, if the curbing that has been laid by our contractors has been damaged by our local residents driving their cars into it, I don't know that that will be the contractor's fault, but someone's going to have to fix it up eventually. You had another question, Councillor Melrosa. You're about to move on to more questions when I asked you to break them up. No,
No,
that's
that was it. Thanks.
All right, good. Are there any other questions without notice? Councillor Devereux?
Thanks, Mervyn. Just a couple. I think it was last year, but maybe it was earlier than that. We received a petition from shop owners in the Oates Street shops or business centre, expressing concern that some of them were in jeopardy because they felt like there wasn't enough short-term parking. And I know since then the post office has gone out of business, and I just wanted to ask if there's been an assessment of the parking usage in that place, because I understand when that happened there was to be a review after a year, but I can't exactly remember when that was.
Mr. Rolls, that one you want to take on notice?
Correct.
Yep, we'll take that on notice. Councillor Devereux, do you have another question?
Just one other. It came up recently as well from the community, a request for traffic calming on Rutland Avenue, and there was some consideration to when that might be possible to be considered, and I just wondered whether we'd had any progress on that consideration. Thank you.
As I recall, Councillor Devereux, that was I moved an amendment to that effect to bring back a report on traffic calming options for Rutland Avenue at the September council meeting, and for a report to come back to council in December. Mr. Acting CEO, is that right where we're at? Seems like it was at the October meeting when we got the update on the advocacy for the Rutland Avenue, so a couple of weeks ago. It's a competition at the moment between the Acting CEO and the Acting Manager of Governance Strategy to see who can find the minutes quickest. Yeah, so it was at October's meeting, it was to bring a report in for December 2024. So I don't know if Mr Acting CEO can tell you how the report's going. No. So, but there is a report coming, and noting that we have agenda briefing forum for December is in the last week of November. So it's only a couple of weeks away now. Councillor Devereux.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other general questions without notice? No? All right, thank you. Item 19 on the agenda is confidential matters. We have nil, and so there being no other items of business at 8:10 p.m, declare the agenda briefing is closed. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and those who stayed on live streaming tonight. Thank you. Good evening.